Hello, my name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, and recommended by LinkedIn Sales as one of 15 innovating sales influencers to follow. My next guest talks about data and data-driven strategies. Her company helps companies to identify what's going wrong. Why is the churn so high? Why are the revenues stagnating? All of that. But it's really about looking into their own data and really understanding where the data is sitting. And it's not always, in fact, a lot of it's not in the CRM system. But once you understand where to find the data, they put a dashboard on top so that we can measure the KPIs of what they're trying to achieve. I think it's really interesting. We invest so much in CRM systems that don't often work, but actually there's data sitting elsewhere. So it's helping companies to organize where the data is and how to fill the gaps, very much like fill the gaps to achieve the objectives. So you're going to love the conversation we have today. My next guest has deep roots in B2B, having grown up in Thomas Publishing Company, Miller Freeman, and Reed Elsevier, and IDG. Her extensive experience stretches to SaaS and event tech. She is recognized as an expert and partner with many years of leadership and operating experience in the industries she serves. She founded H2K Labs, which helps clients generate financial returns from data. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, Heather Holst-Knudsen. Great to have you. Now, we met at the Pavilion GTM conference, didn't we? We had this great conversation in the bar. And so, it's not been too long, actually, 6 months or so to actually get you on the podcast and continue our conversation. So I'm really looking forward to this. So first of all, by way of an introduction, tell me more about H2K, because I absolutely love what you do in terms of the retention and data collection. And tell us what you do for your customers.
So we focus on modernizing what I like to call the revenue room. The revenue room is the integrated functions within the company that all have what I call revenue critical role. So it's not just sales, it's marketing. It's in the businesses that I serve. It's also the audience, which is different than sales marketing. It's the customer success and delivery teams. It's content teams, right? Because content is part of the product, and it even includes finance teams. But how do you align these revenue critical functions and help improve sales using a data-driven approach? I truly believe that many times the gaps in revenue are not a function of the salespeople. It's a function of the process and the data that they are empowered to use to improve how they go to market, how they acquire, retain, and expand customers. So we go in and we help deploy a data-driven revenue growth strategy for their revenue room.
It's interesting because it's a unique approach, really. We often focus on the salespeople and not focus on the machine behind them, and all of the data that's not being collected, or it's been collected but it's not being acted upon. So what would be your starting point going into an organization? Well, first of all, why would they call you in? Because they're not aware that they have a problem, or they may be diagnosing the wrong problem, or they don't know the solution to the problem. So what would the customer say, and what would be your starting point?
Well, that first part. So any client or customer or prospect that comes to me and says they're happy with their revenue would never be a client of ours, right? Like, who's happy with revenue? You always want to grow and you always want to expand. You want to improve customer retention. There is no perfect company out there that does not have an issue with retention, expansion, cross-sell, and want to do it better. I think the type of company that would come to me would say, you know what, we've been trying everything with growing revenue, training ad nauseum, like skills, like we cannot fix this problem right now. And they would come and I would say, okay, great. Listen, what we need to do is do it's an onion, right? We have to peel the onion and we're going to use data to peel the onion so that we know where to focus efforts and how we're going to go after low-hanging fruit improvements to the larger, bigger picture. So let's use a non-sales issue, right? That's not the salesperson's fault. And I'll talk about customer churn. So in the businesses I serve, which are media and events and business information companies, and I know you have Alice Hyman was on one of your shows, and I know you were talking with Sandra Long also about events. Like I live, eat, breathe, and die this business model. One of the biggest reasons for customer churn in the column I call your own dang fault, like you can control it, is program performance. It is what you sell your client, advertising, impressions, clicks, leads, what they're getting at the show. And it's not just numbers, it's quality. And the salesperson goes out and says, I can get you all of this stuff, right? And so they get a contract with multiple layers. That then gets shipped over to the delivery team who's like, what the heck did the salesperson sell? We can't do that. But guess what? Contract signed. So they have to go out and try to deploy programs against these expectations. So if you're using data, two things can happen. One, you can diagnose the overexuberant salesperson traits and see which salespeople are overselling a lot because they have, on the flip side, customers' dissatisfaction, programs aren't being met, and coach up that salesperson, right? But you've got data behind it. So that helps. Salespeople need data to prove that what they're doing isn't right. But on the flip side, let's say the salesperson did sell correctly. You now have data behind it to say on customer success side, we've got to hit these targets and I have to keep the salesperson apprised of how we're doing. And we have data now to ensure we're hitting it. And if we're not, we're pivoting so that I'm improving the way that I'm delivering to my customer. So that's two very simple ways using data can help improve sales skills performance based on the program effectiveness, which in turn would have a direct impact on churn.
So this data exists, this data has been collected, but this data is not being utilized in the way to give the informed decision making.
Yes, that is absolutely a true statement.
Yeah, right. So well, not all, but one of the things that you're doing is identifying what data they have that is being collected and actually getting them to interpret in a way that's useful. Yes.
So, one of the other misconceptions in sales is that everything exists in the CRM. And, that's totally not true in terms of forecasting and empowering salespeople and customers. There's so much data, especially in the businesses I serve, that sit outside the CRM that are critical to how you forecast, understand customer needs and demands, and how your sales team is doing and what the customer behaviors are. So what we do is we come in and say, what data sits in the CRM that's critical? What data sits outside the CRM that's critical? How do we curate and blend that data for a single source of revenue truth? And then when you get that single source of revenue truth, what are the most important KPIs that we need to be looking at as a business right now? And you can't boil the ocean. Right? Let's say churn's not a problem for them, right? They have great retention, but the wallet share is going down, or like it's not moving. Like your growth with existing customers isn't moving. That's a different issue. That's an upsell expansion issue. So focus on what's critical, what's the most important KPI for the board, for the PE owners or stakeholders, and then we go in and help them make dashboards that will help them make everybody act in those functions data driven with regard to the performance they want to see. So do you have technologies that will help you assimilate the data that comes from not only the CRM but different sources so that they can look at a dashboard? You set the KPI and they can look at the dashboard. So you're kind of layering something on top of what they've already got in order for them to continue to collect and
and read that particular data for that KPI and then start to make the improvements. Is that part of the process as well?
Yes. So we call ourselves tech-enabled, value creation specialists, right? The
Yeah.
technical part is due to a platform we have called Insightify, which is a very agile end-to-end data intelligence platform that is very well suited for complex data environments, such as a two-sided or multi-sided business model, which is media, events, business information is, one example of that.
I love the word that you use, revenue truth. There's so many lies in sales on revenue.
Oh, I was, again, driving over to my office to get on this podcast. I'm like, gosh, what else, should I talk about with this? Because I used to lead my own sales team. And one of the things was the lies. Like, I would get so frustrated, whether it was the salesperson not truly understanding what the customer was telling them. Oh, no, they're closing now. I'm like, no, they're not. Or starting to hear things with the customer, but all of the behaviors were different than what they were telling me. And I just like, gosh, if I had this dashboard that would give me the predictive analytics, I could let the salesperson do what they want. I don't want to mess around with their pipeline, but please don't let me forecast incorrectly to my board again, because I don't have that revenue truth that I need.
And that's why I love the word, and we know that it's pretty typical of the industry. And it's, so much the industry through this sales process is like black box. There's all of this stuff going on that we cannot see and cannot get our hands on. And what you say about having predictive validated data is simply by putting that layer on top and really understanding what's important and what isn't important based on what you're trying to achieve and the particular KPI you're measuring for. So, I absolutely get this. I work with a company that's been collecting data for the last 30 years, and it's not based on behaviors or personality or emotional intelligence. It's actually based on what makes a great salesperson and sales operation. And so it's been collecting data, 2 million assessments, so that for every industry and every sector, we know what great looks like. And it's just a benchmark to measure ourselves against what's great about, what I love about this data is that we assume so much in sales. We lie so much in sales. We cover over this black box. And actually, what creates success in sales is often the things that the opposite of what you think. So it's listening over talking, whereas our perception is a great salesperson is someone that's constantly talking, an extrovert and all of that. And what I love about this is this data that tells us the truth. That's why I love your term revenue truth. It tells you the truth. So this box now is clear. You can see through it. It's transparent. We can work. We know what we're working with. Whereas it could be the salesperson, shouldn't be in this role, shouldn't be in sales. The process we're using isn't customer centric. This is how much money we're leaving on the table doing what we're doing, whereas we've got a benchmark of how we can, it helps us to look at the right KPIs and to guide us through to actually get to the optimum of what we've already got, using the resources we've already got. So I absolutely love that you're taking the data within those companies and making it useful.
There's a point there too that you brought up, and I remember our session at the Pavilion event, which was they were surprising characteristics that one wouldn't normally think. But what you also can do with data, like I get so annoyed when I hear like 20% A players, the rest are B and C. Well, that's your fault. You know what? Your job is to go coach. You're always going to get some bad eggs in the basket. That's just the nature of the beast. You get in every function. But in sales, many times salespeople, especially if they're younger, they weren't trained well. We don't train them the right way. We are like, let's use this construct, or selling to veto, or gap selling. You know what? The real A players, what you can use with data is what are they doing every day that makes them good? Number of calls. You actually have all of these tools like Gong. Like, are they talking 70% or 25% of the time? What kinds of words are they using? You can utilize all of that data to upskill what are perceived to be B players, but who could be phenomenal A players if they were just given the proper coaching versus very esoteric or very, brought out there, which you train them once and then it goes into the ether land. So the data could be used by sales managers and leaders as an ongoing coaching tool, and it's data driven, so it's provable.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. I love that, Heather. If you're assessing the individual, not the whole group, because everyone's uniquely different and has different strengths, there's always going to be something everyone's doing well, one person's doing well. But it's identifying that and only coaching the things that are relevant to get them into the top quartile. The C players, you want, we need to know who they are, either put them in a different role or work them out of the company. But the thing is, your revenue won't go down. Your time has just been released. But it's understanding, what you can do to get the B players into A players. And it's not one size fits all. It's got to be individual based. And then you get the coaching notes to coach them up or the coaching notes to coach them out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, it's really about having the right person in the right seats to hit target. And I know that you've got lots of experience by, your many years in sales and coaching. And you also mentioned how the ability to listen in customer experiences is really important. So tell me more about that from your perspective.
So I say this often, you can either throw up on the table or you can sit and listen and absorb, right? And many times salespeople don't know the balance. Listen, I find myself that when I'm excited about something, I'm like, I'll talk about H2K Labs. I'm like, I have to stop, pull back, listen, because listening to your customer gives you a lot of different signals. So we had a huge deal out to a client, and I started listening a little bit more, and I realized, I said, and by the way, everything that I heard came true. I'm like, the CRO is getting fired. They are not buying the solution right now. The CEO is, I don't know how long he's in for the role. So we need another plan of attack. And I was collaborating with a few people on this deal and they weren't listening to me. They're like, no. Like I said, I promise you. And I was even in a session with one of these people at an event. And I just said, something isn't right. Like, even though he wasn't talking to me directly, I was reading the room. And I think as a salesperson, learning that skill is so critical and important because it does a few things. One, it allows you to pivot as needed. Two, if you are reporting up to somebody and you have a huge deal in your pipeline in the 6 or 7 figures, your credibility is on the line because that deal needs to be managed so well because all eyes are on the deal. So learning that skill of listening and reading the room is critical. And that takes time to learn. I wouldn't say that that's you're born with it skill.
Yeah. So tell me more about developing first-party data strategies.
So first-party data is a real big buzz. And decision support tools to help them do their
Heather,
jobs.
you just froze. So let me ask you that question again. It's just that when I ask, it says unstable connection.
So mine looks fine, but
yeah.
I
Okay,
hope so.
it only froze at that question. So let me ask you that again. Okay, and we'll cut this bit out. So tell me more about first-party data strategies, Heather.
So first-party data strategies, this is a very big buzzword and actually a really important data monetization play for media and event companies. So first-party data is all the data you are collecting on your website about what your prospects and audience are doing. But in the world of events, media, and business information, they're going out to very large audiences and providing them with content and decision support tools to help them make decisions better, faster, and with less risk. So there's a huge amount of purchase intent behaviors happening. Am I reading articles or looking at products that you have in your product discovery tool on software? I'm looking for ERP or supply chain. Those are all intent signals. So from a business perspective, these businesses I work with are looking to capitalize on the first party data that is happening on their sites, packaging it up and selling it to their advertisers and sponsors and exhibitors, because that data helps those customers understand where to place, is it a qualified lead? Where do I place it in the pipeline? How much is it engaged with me and my competitors? Like, this is all data that you can provide to them. And there's huge value in it. But there's also first-party data that, and again, this is so typical of media and events, like they're using it for that. They're not using it for themselves. There's all of this first-party data that's happening on their sites as it relates to their sales, whether it's subscription, audience side revenue, or exhibitor, sponsor, advertiser. So there's a huge play there, I believe, for them to actually activate the data to help them ramp up their own revenue streams.
Right. And how would that enable the kind of customer experience further if they were using it, internally?
So let's use the audience monetization side. So you're typically a media or an event company, and especially business information, they're selling subscriptions of some level, of some type, to their audience, as well as maybe research, like one-off research reports, or attending an event, so a ticket sale. Or it could be that they're selling a paid professional subscription like Pavilion, right? That's a great example. And you have people coming to your website and they may be looking at things like, they keep coming back and they're looking at articles and content about supply chain. I'll just keep using an industry that I'm familiar with. So if they're using first party data correctly, what the media or event organizer or business information company should be doing is saying, okay, we've got a newsletter on supply chain, and we have an event on supply chain, and we have a supply chain community. I want to target Heather because Heather seems to be enmeshed in supply chain, but with very specific, relevant messaging. Like, everyone uses the word personalization. Like, personalization is yesterday. It is personalization plus relevancy equals the equation to conversion. So that's one example of using first-party data to improve a media or event company's own specific outcomes.
Love this. So what practical strategy would you advise to enable these buyers to buy?
When you say the buyers to buy, which buyers are you referring to?
So in your industry, it would be the event exhibitors that would buy from the event planner. So what strategies would you?
So there's a couple of really interesting strategies that could help, for example, in the event space. And that, again, goes back to data. And I call it like a lookalike ROI assessment. Let's call this for new business acquisition. So they don't work with the business yet. So literally what a company could do if they had real-time visualization and access to program performance, you could create a lookalike audience or a lookalike segment. So let's say I was targeting enterprise software, ERP, and I had 5 major ERP players and I had 10 that weren't playing with me yet, right? But they were walking my show floor, or I knew I was at an event that they were attending. I would actually aggregate and say, hey, it's anonymized, but I want to show you a couple of examples of program performance based on spend, the components that make up this contract, and the performance that these companies that look like you are getting, and I have proof in the pudding that you can get this. Is this something that you would like to receive? And then you can move into, because it's a value-based discussion now. I'm not selling them square footage. I'm not selling them, I can just get you a random number of leads. I'm showing value, and I can drill down and do a lot of helpful, what I call exciting tidbits or carrots to get to move the conversation along. So that's one example where, again, if you empower your salespeople with data, they can sell better. And that's just with new business acquisition.
Love that. Love that. Okay. So if you were on a desert island on your own, Heather, what would be the one thing you took with you?
So I would take a book. And the book that I have on my nightstand, a client actually recommended to me, is called The Women. I love to read. And I feel like because of technology and just work life, I have not read anywhere near as much as I used to read. And I just need to, I need to give my brain some brain juice. And that's what I would take, a book. But I was like, well, that'll run out. So a book that lasts for a long time. But if
it's a good book, like I used to be for a good 22 years, a member of a book club. And I would read a book thinking I knew the book. And as soon as I got into the discussion, it's like, I didn't realize that. I did. It's like a whole new book. It's like, what have I been reading? So I think sometimes when you read a book and you read it for a second time, you see completely different things. It's a bit like a great painting. Every time you look at it, you see something different. So I think, that if it's a good book, it will keep you going for a while, Heather.
Yeah, no, I'll look forward to reading it, by the way, and I'll let you know how it is.
Yes. All right. Well, how can listeners get hold of you?
They can get a hold of me by emailing me at heather@h2klabs.com or go to our website, h2klabs.com.
Lovely. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing all your insight and experience around data. I know our listeners will find this as useful and as informative as I have. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And I know in my methodology, I use data, but in a completely different way, but really to get to the same results. How much money are you leaving on the table? Let me help you with that. So thank you so much for being a guest of Scale Your Sales podcast, Heather.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.